There's a recurring joke online about how one of the most difficult things to do in web development is centering elements with CSS. In this video, I'm going to show how to do that, and I'm going to show different methods, from how it was done a long time ago, how it evolved, and what's the method that you should be using now. In the past, when there was not an easy way of centering elements, we used tables to center the things on the page. This is a wrong way of doing things, and it should not be used now, but it was basically the only option back then. The idea was to add a table, and I'm going to do it here, table, trtd, a table that has only one cell, and then we would need to close it, tr and table. And the table, we would specify a width of 100% and a height of, in particular, we would put a height that we want. And then the table cell would have vertical line, center, and a text line, center. And that way we would be centering vertically and horizontally. It is wrong for many reasons. For example, it's really verbose. There's a lot of elements that we don't really need. Also, we are not using them for their semantic value, but because of how they display elements. That is an accessibility problem, and using tables for laying out is never a good idea. So this thing stopped, and we stopped using tables, and I recommend that you never use it for this. Instead, then we moved to positioning things. And that was a little bit better, but there were some issues too. We would have to specify a width and a height. Let's say, for example, width 200 pixels, height 60 pixels. And then we would need to center vertically within that element. For that, we would use something like line height, make it the same as the height. Finally, we would say position absolute, top 50%, left 50%, and then we would use negative margins because right now it's not really centered. If you see, it's a little bit sideways. So what we would need to do is say margin left. If the width is 200, then we would need to do minus 100 pixels. And if the height is 60, then we would margin top minus 30 pixels. Then we would do text align, center, so we center the text within the box. And now it's centered both horizontally and vertically. This solution also has many problems, and I recommend not using it. In the past, we didn't have support for CSS variables or custom properties, so we had to do it manually. Now it would be easier to do it this way by defining a custom property, assign it to the width, and then using calc to calculate the negative margin. But this would affect how elements are laid out on the page, so it's not a good way. So also another problem that we have is that we need to know the width and height of the element, and that is not always possible. So instead, we're going to use a different method that uses position absolute, and that was the next step. We remove the width and height, and the line height too. We leave the position absolute, top 50, left 50, and what we're going to do is we say transform, translate, minus 50%, minus 50%. The percentage in the translate is referred to the size of the element. So what we're saying is move it 50% to the left, 50% to the top. That's the negative. This was the most common way of centering elements vertically and horizontally for a while. I personally liked it because it's really simple, and also it doesn't depend on any other element. Yes, you need a position in the container, but that's about it. And it will be a total of 4 or 5 lines of code. in CSS and no additional HTML. But then Flex and Grid arrived, and they provided different ways of centering that are better than this one. The interesting thing about centering with Flex or with Grid is that the styles don't go on the element itself, they go on the parent, on the container. So let's see how it is. This container is right now on the body, so we're going to apply the styles to the body. We're going to say display flex, then we're going to say align items center, and justify content center. This is going to center horizontally but not vertically. This happens because the body doesn't have a height. If we specify a height of 100 VH, now our text is centered vertically and horizontally both. And if we want to center with grid, we can just, for example, do display grid, and this will work the same. Or an even better solution would be we can use both of them, align items and justify content by doing place item center. And that is the last way that I'm going to review today. In these 5 minutes of video, we have seen how to center vertically and horizontally with CSS in 5 different ways. I wouldn't recommend using the first 2 because they are outdated and they're wrong. We shouldn't be using tables for layout, and having to set the size of the element before centering it is kind of a pain. But there's no reason why you wouldn't be able to use any of the other 3 methods in your modern project. Knowing how to center in CSS is a really practical and useful skill to have. And as you have seen, it's not that complicated, and most likely you're going to use it at some point in your career. We used to ask this question as part of the interview process for front-end development positions, and the funny thing is that not that many developers were able to answer correctly, not even the more seasoned ones. But as you can see, again, it's not that difficult. So I hope that if somebody asks you during an interview, this video helped you with this. Thank you for watching.